Alrighty, good afternoon, everyone. This is going to be the weekly outlook for May the 12th to the 16th. Some things to talk about coming into this week. We do have some news over the weekend with China and the US, so we'll see what happens in the after hours once futures opens up, and we'll see what happens in the morning as well. So this is just going to be kind of a rough outlook of exactly what we're looking for coming into this week, and then we'll talk a little bit more in detail in the actual pre-market. So coming into this week, first things first, we'll take a look at the key economic events. Nothing on Monday, but we do have some CPI that's going to be at Tuesday at 8:30 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. This is going to be fairly important. We also have Wednesday. I'm not sure if this time is correct, but we do have a Fed speaker that's speaking. I'll have to check back up on that, but we do have a Fed speaker on Wednesday. For Thursday, we have core PPI. So we have CPI on Tuesday, and then core PPI, like retail sales, unemployment, a bunch of stuff here on Thursday. And then Friday, we do have a pretty big one, consumer sentiment. This is also going to be at Friday, 10 a.m. So that's it for all I'm actually not sure if this time's right. You can also see Fed Chair Powell speaking later into the day as well. I'm going to have to do this. I'm not sure if the timing is correct here. Let me actually check this out real quick. Yeah, so these are some weird times. So Fed Chair Powell speaking at 8:40. Interesting. We'll keep a look at that. Take a look at that once Thursday comes. As for the earnings calendar coming to this week, what we do have, no more major news for the big tech, but we have some smaller earnings that we can keep an eye out on, like Cisco, potentially Baba, like Kava, a bunch of these other names. Sorry, you have Walmart on Thursday, a bunch of other names. So let's go on to the tech names and see exactly what we're looking for coming into this week. So thesis for this coming week. Right now, you can see that ES is holding up after reclaiming key levels. Currently, we have been consolidating all week. We have news over the weekend, which is important. So we will see how the market opens up Monday morning. What I'd like to see coming and moving forward for the upside is the hold of your 5.60. So as you can see, if I zoom in here just a little bit, this is our previous pivot point, which is the area that we broke down from. You can see this also your tariff news high as well. So now that we're above this level, we like to see ES really maintain above this level for this continued pushback towards the highs. So if we go into the ES chart, as you can see, those are the higher time frame daily levels. Now these ones that I have marked out here are 1 hour levels, but if we're looking at the higher time frames, similar thing applies, right? Hold now of your 5, 6, 20. Let's go into lower time frames here. The key levels coming into next week is going to be number one, your 5, 600. That's your key level. We have another key level here, which is your 5, 6, 8, 4. Really, this is equilibrium from the top of the range down to the bottom of the range, right? This is the equilibrium. Coming into next week, we want to see the reaction that we have off of the highs or the low of the range. Most likely, potentially, we could have a gap up over the weekend. We'll see what happens, but if we do end up pushing higher, I would like to see now the hold of your 5, 7, 20. That's going to be the key level for any sort of continued push towards upside. So far, you can see the market has been building up higher lows. So we'll see what comes, and we'll see what happens coming into market open here on Monday. If you go into the next chart that we have, which is the SPY thesis for this coming week, as you can see, SPY reclaim key levels on the higher time frames, being the 550. We are now basing above that level. What I like to see moving forward is a reaction off the 550. As long as we maintain above this level, we can see a move back towards 577 and above. So as you can see right here, similar thing. This is your key pivot point. If we maintain above your 550, we can now see price push back towards the upside. So let's go back onto the SPY chart. If I remove a couple of things, as you can see right here, key levels for the SPY is going to be this general area, right? Your 552. As I mentioned, if we maintain above 552, the next logical level is going to be all the way back up and towards your 570, which is the area that we broke down from. So if I go back onto the SPY, go into lower time frames here, key levels that we like to see above, really now is going to be this 570. So for the overall market, Last week for the SPY, we've been just really trading around this 564. The low of the range is your 550s. The top of the range in this case is your 570s. So you can see SPY basically closed right in the middle of the range here on Friday. Coming to next week, what we'd like to see moving forward, number one, hold of your 560s, your higher lows be built. Right, we'd like to see now the hold of your 560s, right, reclaim above your 568 for a potential move back up and towards 570. Above 570, really we have a clear shot back up and towards the next key levels in this case, which is going to be right the 570 and the next leg higher, which is your 576. So those are the levels I have marked out here on the SPY chart. Now we can go on to the NQ daily time frame. Right now you can see that we are basing above your 19,500 level on the NQ. This is the pivot point on the higher time frames. What I like to see moving forward is the reaction that we have off this level. As long as we maintain above this level, we can see a move back up and towards your 21,200. So for the NQ, as you can see, this is the area that we broke down from. Now what we like to see is really base above this level for this continued push back towards the upside. If we zoom in here and go on to, actually we can start off on the daily time frame. So if we start off on the daily time frame, as you can see now we broke back structure towards the upside. As long as we base above this 19,600, we can expect price to push back up and towards your next key pivot high, and then potentially all the way back up and towards your 21,000. So if we go back onto the lower time frames here for the NQ so far, right, just building up these higher lows. Now what we like to see for the NQ coming to next week is really the hold above your last week's pivot high, which is going to be this 2282. So this is your Friday's reaction. This was from a couple of weeks ago here as well. Now what we like to see, break above, hold above your 2280s for this continued push back towards the upside. If we're just inside of this range, you can expect, right, NQ just to kind of stick in towards these general areas. So what we like to see is the break above your 2282 here for the NQ. If you go into the QQQ, key levels in this case is going to be this range low, which is your 478. We also have your range high, which is your 492. Similar to the NQ, we like to see now the break above, hold above your 491 for any sort of continued pushback towards the upside here on the overall markets. Okay, those are the major indices. Now let's head on to some of the tech names. So thesis for this coming week, nice base on Tesla above the 270 key level. As you can see, we're finally breaking back towards the upside above 290s now. What I would like to see moving forward on this name is a push back above and hold above 300. We can see a quick move on this one back towards 320. If we can hold above, really it's going to be that 300 key level. So if we go into Tesla, really nice base above a certain key area. So if I remove a couple key levels here, the level that we had drawn out was really this 270. So this is your previous level of resistance turned into support. This was your gap fill area where you have multiple touches around this general area. This also coincided with that tariff news high. Once we were able to break above this tariff news high, you can see based above this level, which is your 274. And now what we can see is a potential push back up in towards your 320 on Tesla if you can hold above your 300. So coming into next week, really the key levels now that I have, as you can see, based above that 270, nice push higher. Now what we like to see is this be used as resistance turning into support here at this 292 for this continued push back up and towards your 309 and above. So if you look on the daily time frame, key levels, right, this basically 296, we like to see hold. Now we'd also like to see it get above 300. We also like to see it get above, now it's going to be your previous highs as well. So number one, the hold of your 294. Another scenario, right, hold of this 303 for this continued push back towards the upside here, which is the next levels 309 and potentially above, being all the way back up in towards this 324. So we'll keep an eye out on Tesla. This one had a nice breakout on Friday, so we'll see if we can have continuation above your previous day's highs now for Tesla. Let's go into the next chart. Next chart here is NVIDIA. Thesis for this coming week, NVIDIA currently right at a very key pivot point in the markets. This is the low all the way from January of earlier this year. What I'd like to see is the reaction off this level moving forward. If we can hold and break back above your 118, we can see a move back towards the upside. So this is the key level for me just because this is basically that earnings gap that we had Sorry, this was not an earnings gap, but this was the gap down that we had that was on that one Monday where we had a really big drop on Nvidia. This is basically that low. Now you can see we've had multiple touches around this general area, so it's going to have to get back above this 118 here if we want to see any sort of continued pushback towards the upside. So as you can see, these are the key levels that I have marked out, at least on the daily time frame. So you can see this is a very key pivot point that we'd like to see it get above here for Nvidia for a hold. Oops. Now let's actually go into lower time frames and we can mark out some brand new levels for Nvidia. So now let's see if I can pull up some of my other levels that I previously had. All right, these levels aren't as valid anymore. But for Nvidia, as you can see, what we have marked out is going to be this 115 previous level of resistance where we had a nice break towards the upside. Now you can see price actually coming back down to retest. So on Friday, price coming back down to retest this 115. So let's see if we can maintain above this 115 for this continued pushback towards the high. So the next levels we can have marked out is really going to be right on the daily time frame. We can just go back, mark out this key pivot high back here. We can drag this over. You can see it basically coincides with your 119, basically your last week's high here as well. So if we go into lower time frames, these are the key levels that I have marked out. I have your 118.70, which is basically your last week's highs. We have your 115, which is the area that we broke out from. So what I would like to see on Nvidia, now the hold of your 115 for this continued push back up and towards your last week's highs, or the break above your 118. Hold above this level for this continued push back towards the highs here as well. So these are the levels I'm going to have marked out on Nvidia coming into next week. Let's go on to the next chart that we have, Apple. Thesis for this coming week. Right now, you can see that Apple is lagging versus the overall markets. After earnings, this is pushed back towards the downside. What I like to see is a reaction off 208, which is the level that we broke down from. So for Apple, as you can see right here, go back onto the higher time frames. Let's go into the daily chart here. So for Apple, as you can see, so far this one's lagging behind the overall market. The markets are bouncing here. Apple, after earnings, took out this high. And you can see we're having a little bit of a pullback here on Apple. So this is the one where we'd like to see it start basing and potentially move back up in towards the next key level. So in this case, the levels that we can have marked out is the day that we ended up dropping. So this is the earnings low that we've created. Let me actually turn this back on. Let me actually get rid of all these levels here. So for Apple, the only key levels I'll have marked out now coming into next week, we can just first start off drawing out the day that we ended up dropping at, which was this earnings low. Let's see if we have this level marked out. Sorry, it's actually this level right here. So this is basically your earnings low. This is the day low that we had after earnings. Other levels that we can have marked in this case, let's go into the 15-minute time frame. We can draw out a couple more key levels. So in this case, we can draw this low that we created all the way down here. And we can drag this one over. So we can kind of extend it, drag it over, right? You can see this 198. So coming to next week, you can see really after this earnings day that we had, basically a lot of consolidation last week. This is your Mondays, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. So this is basically your Monday's price action. On Apple, you can see basically all of last week, we kind of just consolidated. We didn't really do too much and we kind of just closed right in the equilibrium for the whole week. So for Apple coming to next week, we're going to keep an eye out on this 198. Break underneath this 198, potential move back down in towards your last week's lows. If we can maintain above your 198, we can see this push back up and towards your previous day highs and potentially higher, being all the way back up and towards your 202. So those are the levels I have for Apple coming into next week. I'm not too interested in trading Apple just because not too much volatility. This one's lagging behind the overall markets. Any sort of trade towards the upside is going to be a little bit more difficult. I'd much rather pay attention to Nvidia or Tesla. As for AMD, AMD starting to find a bottom here. We've had a nice bounce off the bottom being at 80. Once we reclaim 96, you can see that we're having a nice pushback towards the upside. What I'd like to see is AMD start moving back towards that daily gap in that 116 key level. So for AMD, if you look at the daily time frame, as you can see right here, this is really the area that we broke down from. We're in a very long downtrend. We're still technically in a downtrend here on AMD. We're finally reclaimed a key level though, which is your 96, your tariff news high, also the level that we broke down from. So multiple touches here on AMD. Now we're using this as a retest for a potential pushback towards the upside here. What I like to see moving forward on this name is really now just a hold of your 96. Hold of your 96. You can see we had earnings. This is the exact level we'd like to see hold. We also have another key pivot high, which is going to be back up and towards your 104. You can see we're having a tough time above this area. You can see this is your earnings wick. We also had a wick here on Thursday. We're going to have to get above this 104 and hold above this 104 if we want to see any sort of continued pushback towards the upside. Other key levels that we can have marked out are going to be this level, which we can drag over, right, or 102. So as you can see, this is your Monday's highs, your Thursday's lows, your Friday's lows. So we can draw these levels, 104 and 102 coming into market open here on Monday. Let's go on to the next charts that we have. Meta. Right now, you can see that Meta reclaimed above the new tariff, the news tariff highs. Now that we're above that level, I'd like to see this hold above your 584 moving forward for a pushback towards the upside. So for Meta, as you can see here, the key levels that we have drawn out is your 584. So this is your previous level of support, tariff news highs. Now we like to see a base above your 584 for a continued push back towards the upside here. If we go on to the charts, go back onto the 1 hour time frame. As you can see here, right, this is the key levels that we have marked out. So for Meta, as you can see, this is our base, multiple touches. Now we like to see just hold of your 584, push back up in towards your previous week's highs and potentially above back up and towards the 633. So if you get rid of this level, you can draw out some brand new levels here for Meta. Let's actually extend these over and get rid of this. The key levels I have marked out, this earnings pivot high. We have the day after earnings, which is this high right here. And then we basically have a pivot point from, I think this was last week as well. So this is a key level, which is your 604. So far, you can see we kind of closed right back in equilibrium between your 604 and this 581 here for Meta. So coming to next week, any more upside, we like to see number one, break back above your 604 for this continued push higher, or we like to see, right, the bounce off your 582 earnings high for this continued push back towards the upside here on Meta. As for the last name that we have is going to be Amazon. Thesis for this coming week, right now you can see that Amazon is coming up towards the tariff news highs. What I like to see moving forward for more upside is the hold of your 193 for continuation back towards the highs. So for Amazon, similar thing, multiple touches here. This is your tariff news highs. We like to see now get above this level for this continued push back towards the upside. So for Amazon, if you look at the daily time frame, key levels that we have marked out, as you can see right here, or 193, multiple touches. Now let's go on to the lower time frames. Let's get rid of this, and we can mark out brand new levels. So for Amazon, let's actually just get rid of all this. So we have a lot of key levels for Amazon. Let's just get rid of all this and we can draw brand new levels. So first things first, what I'm going to have marked out, this key pivot high, this was from the tariff news high. We can drag this down in towards this 194, exact level that we're going to have to get above. Next levels I can draw is basically just equilibrium where we have multiple touches. I'll just drag this over here. You can see last week just kind of bouncing off this key level, multiple touches. Then we can draw out the low of the range, which is going to be, right, this earnings low here. So I'll draw this, right, multiple touches in this case down and towards that earnings low. So for Amazon, you can see really just a lot of consolidation. We're not above this earnings, this news tariff highs just as of yet. You can see multiple touches. Price is going to have to get above this 194 if we want to see any sort of continued push higher. So you can see wicks all the way back here. You can see tried closing above at least on the intraday time frame. Higher time frame, I like to see close above 194 for this continued pushback towards the upside. So that's what we're going to have here for Amazon. You can see we're building up these higher lows on the overall market. We're going to have to get above 194 for any sort of continued pushback towards the upside. So that's what I have for most of these tech names here. I can go over a few more, but I'll probably go over them in the pre-market, at least for the SPY and Q. Similar thing. We're going to have news over the weekend. So we'll talk about this a little bit more in the pre-market prep. So with that being said, hope you guys had a great weekend. And I'll see you guys all tomorrow morning in the pre-market prep. All right, take care, everyone.